kind of newsreel footage, and they'll give you a little, text primer of what you're about to see. And it'll say because a lot of this footage was actually of the Olympic, they blotted them out on the film. So that's why you'll see those weird blotches. Blotching out, this actually says Olympic on it. But we don't want you to see that.
Yeah. And JP Morgan, he upped his insurance 5 days before the disaster. And they don't investigate.
Now, I have a post on, I among my numerous sites, I have one called holyhexes.com. And there's a post on there covering this documentary called Why They Sank the Titanic. And again, this a bit of this was, again, new to me as far as it just kind of mirroring another 9/11 situation.
Also on the 11th, we had a story that the U.S. military is training its troops to be telepathic. And, of course, they had another one last year on the Ides where the troops were meditating. They were being taught meditation. And my joke about that was if they get into the telepathic realm, Mothman's going to, beat the crap out of them. Because Mothman's the king of telepathy. We also had a Manson son story on the 11th. One of his many sons comes out, and that's why he's calling people all over this country with his cell phone, is because he's got all these kids. But they only picked that one guy to really cover in the media for some reason. And I made a joke that, he was calling Maine because he was calling the Bushes. Because I'm probably one of my craziest theories is that he's related to Manson. Bush, W. I just get the feeling that they're related. And of course, probably know the story about Barbara Bush being the product of Aleister Crowley and
the Babylon working.
And are you familiar with the George Scherf story that Tesla's assistant George Scherf was really Prescott Bush?
Yes, actually, I heard that recently. The Curious George.
Yeah. And so they steal the patents. They burn down Tesla's lab. They take the tablets, the patents to their friend Lindy in Germany, who lives on the same block as Hitler. Lindy patents the patents, goes into business with Union Carbide in Charleston, West Virginia, and they crank out all kinds of stuff and give it to the Germans. Lindy is a prime partner with Carbide, and in fact, those two developed the entire atomic industry based on what they knew about Hitler's nuclear research.
I was recently turned on to something about a chemical called MIC that's buried in West Virginia. That's the exact same thing, except 10 times more of it that destroyed Bhopal, India. Yeah,
they sent a lot of that to France, probably to a Rhone Poulenc place over there, because Rhone was running it for a while. Now Bayer runs it, and this is the very plant where they have that MIC that is behind the fracking mania. Why? Because they need all the natural gas they can get to crack it there and make all their different products. They've been doing it for 100 years. They first started doing it in Clendenin. The original plant, the very first natural gas cracking plant is in Clendenin, or was, and that was where the very first Mothman sighting was in 1966. Mothman tends to show up around these plants.
I think, just briefly for folks, I tend, my own kind of reading of Mothman is that it is a harbinger or a warning, and it may, take that kind of manifestation.
Yeah. I think the Garuda model is the best way to look at it. The Thunderbird's also a good one, but it's basically an archetypal protector deity.
And that's so the Mothman / Garuda. That's also the Virginia Tech mascot, right?
No, that's the hokey bird. Loren Coleman tried to make that into the Garuda because he's always trying to demonize Mothman. But there was an MIC accident at that plant a couple of years ago where one of the tanks exploded. It wasn't one of the MIC tanks, but it was right across from one. like 50 feet away and barely missed penetrating it with exploded metal. Would have killed everybody in the area.
God.
And you know what they've got for a response at this MIC plant? The POCA, nice name for the POCA Volunteer Fire Department, which has 6 guys and an old truck. That's the emergency response for the most dangerous chemical plant in the country. And now there's just yesterday, there was more news about the class action suit to protect, supposedly compensate the thousands of people living in the Kanawha Valley who have been poisoned since 1950 something, but most of those people are dead. So the whole thing is really a whitewash. And I know my sister works at that plant, or my cousin, I'm sorry, works at that plant. And she told me that in addition to the POCA Fire Department, their only on-site medical help is milk. They're supposed to drink milk if there's a disaster. And then I found out that there was a scandal involving the milk because they were shipping the milk to the plant in trucks that were carrying chemicals in the other direction. If you can believe that.
I worry about West Virginia. I mean, because my girlfriend and I have lived in Portland for 7-8 years now. And I think we've always kind of said we'd maybe ultimately like to go back to West Virginia later. But then there's parts of me that kind of think, man, it's completely being destroyed.
Well, I go back every couple of years and I do some more research in the area there, trying to find out more about Manson and stuff. And I took my Geiger counter there, and it was going off in North Charleston. And so I noted that, and I'm like, what is that all about? So then last year at the Mothman Festival, this lady who worked at the Tech Center in Carbide comes up and she goes, I'm retired now, but we dismantled the secret nuclear reactor that was at the Tech Center. And so this was probably because Carbide developed the entire nuclear industry and was in league with the Germans. That is probably the very first nuclear reactor that ever existed. But it's been kept completely secret. And even when you see documentaries today about World War II and how the Nazis supposedly developed synthetic gasoline, well, that, from coal oil, that was all developed in the Kanawha Valley in the 1800s. It's just all supposed to be completely secret. So they attribute all this stuff to the Nazis when in fact it was all developed right there long ago.
Why do you think they called it West Virginia instead of Kanawha, which was going to be, I think, the name of the breakaway state?
Because during the Civil War, Virginia, wanted to fight for the South, and all the people on the west side of the mountains, who really are more like Ohio people, Charleston is really a lot more like Ohio than it is anything else. And it's the Ohio Valley, basically. So there's a real difference in the east side of West Virginia is more like Virginia, which is really conservative. The west side is way more liberal, I think, and way more politically aware.
I always found Shepherdstown in the Eastern Panhandle to be a little hideaway in a way.
Yeah. Well, those are your nice little academic spook towns, I call them.
Yep. That's what I was just about to also say. It was a nice little hideaway, but the moment we had the Israeli-Syrian peace talks at that new facility that just seemed to pop out of nowhere, that seemed tailor-made for this sort of event, it was like, oh. So I've said it on the show before. I speculate that, a sort of Greenbrier replacement is in Jefferson County, and it's connected to the Fish and Wildlife and the Clarion Inn and all of those things in Shepherdstown.
Yeah, I've heard of the Clarion, yeah. Well, the Sugar Grove base is really the important base. It's really the hub for the entire Navy, and I happen to know this because one of the people that lived right there where everybody saw Mothman and where Manson burned the school down, one of the fathers worked there. He was an engineer. It was all NSA. It used to be a Navy signal station. Now I think they control submarines from there and everything else. But they probably were controlling the UFOs from there too. And you'll notice that when flight, whatever it was that supposedly hit the Pentagon, when it flew around over West Virginia, it completely went around Sugar Grove because you're not allowed to fly over it. But there's a huge underground base there, and it's all NATO people. It's all Europeans, the license plates of everybody around there, British. It's all basically the British intelligence system. It's Echelon connected to the Pine Gap station in Australia. That's why, and they lift all of the phone calls and emails from there too. They get them from this little town called Etam, which is near there, which is mate spelled backwards. So I think the town is named after a Navy, moniker or whatever. AT&T has their dishes there. These are lifted by the Navy, who have the exact same dishes over on their property. And this is why Jay Rockefeller is the senator there, because he owns the phone companies, and that way he can, feed the information directly to the government.
John D. Rockefeller IV. Yeah, Jay Rockefeller. He's been the West Virginia senator for I don't even know how long.
He's very slick. He's so slick. It's unbelievable. I would have to do a whole show on him, but we're probably getting. I don't know how we're doing on time, but you want me to finish April?
Yeah, definitely.
On the 11th, again, Manson's son, telepathic U.S. troops, fireballs, Mayans. We have the Mars monolith story. So they're harking back to a 2001 Space Odyssey meme. And that whole story came to mind for me about Kubrick probably filming the Apollo missions.
And all of that seemed to really come up lately. There was a documentary that ran at Sundance called Room 237 that goes into all of these different alternate readings of The Shining and Kubrick, and Jay Widener's in there talking about all that.
On the 12th, we had the Connecticut falling object. We had a reversal story that the Jews are reclaiming Jesus. And so on the next day, you have the shooting in Ohio, the Cracker Barrel restaurant shooting. These are all sacrifices. They're meant to, create fear, using the reversal story, have the terror. Then that creates a trust and authority. All you can do in that situation is look to the authorities to somehow protect you. Then we had on the 13th, the Lockerbie guy comes back. He always seems to come back during the Ides. The Lockerbie bomber guy.
The McGrahy.
He ate up a whole week last year. Where is he going to go? It was a week or two of really important stuff was in the media, and that Lockerbie thing came in and just ran with it. There was a $1 billion tribal settlement on the 13th. On the 14th, the Texas fireball. The 4 million year old germ was found in a cave, so I predicted that we'll have a 4 million year old virus soon, created from the germs. Asteroid fears, that's another one, came up that day. Killer dinosaurs from outer space came into the news on the 14th. I thought that was significant because usually they have the NASA stories and the dinosaur stories separate, but on the same day. And in this case, they combine them into one story.
How would you? Well, no. I'm sorry. Continue.
Then the next day on the 15th, we had the 100-year anniversary of the Titanic, and we did have terror. Following the reversal story of the killer dinosaurs, the embassies in Afghanistan were bombed, supposedly by the Taliban. We had the Breivik trial starting. That whole thing was just, there was a second shooter there, right? You remember that guy? Yeah, he with the purple hair.
There have been some great breakdowns on the Norway on Breivik from
With a-
Red Ice Radio.
with a UFO flying